Hey, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Six Pack Network. I am your host, Dylan Clemons. Here today, my co host is Joe Bond, founder of Fantasy Six Pack. And today we are doing our training camp check in show where we are going around to all 32 NFL teams and interviewing a beat writer or reporter on what they've seen or heard from training camp. In this episode, we will be discussing the Los Angeles Rams, and here helping us do so is Blaine Grisak, staff writer and columnist at Turf Show Times, covering the Los Angeles Rams for SB Nation. Blaine, appreciate you giving us your time in such a busy part of the year. How you doing today, man?
Of course, happy to come on, and thanks guys for having me. And this is a Rams team. I think at this time last year, everybody was like expecting Caleb Williams to maybe be in a Rams
Right.
uniform, but here we are now, and I think this team has the expectations are night and day from where they were a year ago.
Right on. Perfect. Before we jump into the interview, I just want to remind everybody to please hit that like button, please subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell for notifications so you know when a new video drops. And then head on over to fantasy6pack.net/plans, become an all access member, where you get access to our award winning rankings, draft cheat sheets, and F6P Discord, where you can ask all your custom league questions to anybody on the Fantasy Six Pack staff. And that truly is the best thing about it. And right now, you can save a little cash by using the promo code F6PNFL24 for 15% off. But without further ado, Joe, how about you hit Blaine here with our first Rams question we got?
Yeah, so the receiving room is one of interest for a lot of people, especially now that Puka Nacua has that knee injury. So, two questions here. What is the impact for Puka's outlook on his season now that he's got this knee injury? What kind of effect do you think this is going to have long term for him? And for Cooper Kupp, like there's a lot of talk that he's looking like he's back, right? So does this mean he's back to 2021 Cooper Kupp, or what should we expect here with him?
Yeah, so in regards to Puka Nacua, I don't think it's necessarily anything to be too concerned about. Sean McVay didn't seem too concerned about it, but Sean McVay can be a little kind of he can hide the status of injuries a little bit, but from what he said, it was like a sack burst in Puka Nacua's knee, and kind of just called it week to week, and that it wouldn't really affect his status for week one. So I would expect Puka Nacua to be ready to go for Sunday Night Football week one against the Detroit Lions, and this is a player that he's kind of developed that rapport with Matthew Stafford last year. Obviously, he's been doing the same types of things in training camp and OTA so far this year. So as far as that goes, I think it's really a lot different than last year, where Cooper Kupp really missed a lot of training camp with that hamstring injury, and that kind of went into the regular season. I wouldn't necessarily think the same really applies with Puka Nacua here. So I still think he's at least somebody that you can draft at kind of the late end of the first round, early part of the second round in fantasy drafts. And then as far as Cooper Kupp goes, can he replicate 2021 numbers? I don't think that's necessarily in the cards for him. That was just a historic season, and putting those expectations on him would be, I think, a little bit unrealistic. But from weeks, I think 5 to 17 last year, I think Nacua had 97 targets, Cooper Kupp had 92 targets, so they're really neck and neck there from a target share standpoint. And I think just with Cooper Kupp being healthy, having a full offseason, developing that rapport again with Matthew Stafford, I think he can get a little bit more efficient with those targets. So I wouldn't necessarily expect him to have, I think, like a top 5 wide receiver fantasy season, but I do think he's being really heavily underdrafted. I think in the SFB draft, I think I got him in like wide receiver 21 or wide receiver 22, which is insane value. So,
oh wow, yeah.
So I think there is value there. I think kind of it's in the realm of possibilities that he could be like a top 15, maybe even getting that top 10 conversation. But I do think the Rams are going to do. I think they're going to be a little bit. They are going to be somewhat cognizant of not necessarily protecting him, but being, I think, more smart with how they use him.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. Staying in the wide receiver room and just the pass catchers in general, I'm curious your thoughts on who you see third in the pecking order in targets. You got Puka, you got Cooper Kupp. Who's the next guy up? And if this Puka injury lingers, who's the wide receiver you see stepping up the most?
Yeah, I think it would have to be Demarcus Robinson. He was a guy that they signed last year and really had an impressive camp last year, but he didn't really come on until later in the year. And really, once they started using him more, kind of week 11, week 12 on, him and Matthew Stafford had a really strong connection, and that's kind of that's lingered into this summer in training camp this year. And obviously, I don't think it's necessarily exciting to draft 8th-year wide receiver DeMarcus Robinson in fantasy just by any means, but he's someone that Matthew Stafford will target in the red zone. He's kind of, especially when you're looking at that Rams depth chart, the guy behind Demarcus Robinson is obviously Tutu Atwell, who obviously has a lot of speed, has that big playability, but not necessarily as effective from a down-to-down basis. And Demarcus Robinson, I think, brings that size that the Rams are looking for in all areas of the field and kind of unlock both vertically and horizontally, which Sean McVay thinks is important. So, I think that third guy is definitely Demarcus Robinson for sure.
Perfect. Joe?
Yeah, no, that's good to know. It'll be interesting to see if he really is like the number 3 target or the guy to step up. Like I think in injury he would be, but like if the actual number 3 target might be somebody else. But over here to running backs, quarterbacks. There's a lot of great weapons on this offense. We already talked about Puka and we talked about Kupp. And they've obviously got Kyren Williams sitting there. The tight end room has been, kind of hit or miss, but pretty good. Do you see Stafford putting together another season, even relatively close to a Super Bowl year? Or do you think with the interceptions climbing the last couple of years for him, that those days are just in the rearview mirror?
Yeah, I think it's certainly, within the realm possibilities that he could hit that 4,500 yard mark and 40 touchdowns. I mean, this is a Sean McVay offense, and it's very quarterback friendly, obviously. So I think it's certainly possible that he could hit those numbers. Whether or not that's realistic, I'm not sure. I think it's more possible that he's kind of at that 4,000 yard range and kind of in that 25 to 30 touchdowns area. I think this is a team too that last year they really overhauled kind of the offensive identity and what it looks like. Early in Sean McVay's tenure, you had him going with this that wide zone running play action off of that and building the offense around that, and then kind of that first year with Stafford, they were more spread, ran a lot of empty sets, had Stafford in shotgun, and kind of just let him wheel and deal. And going into last year, they found success with Kyren Williams in the run game, and they kind of incorporated more of this gap scheme, power scheme, run game, and had a lot of success with that. And I would guess that they continue to do that. You just look at their offseason signings that they bring in. They bring in Jonah Jackson from Detroit, who gives them more size on the interior. They move Steve Avila, who's he's I believe the heaviest center in the NFL now at around 330 pounds. Kevin Dotson, obviously they traded for him at the beginning of last year, brings him a lot of size on the interior as well. And then they signed Colby Parkinson, who comes from Seattle and is kind of more well known as kind of this blocking tight end. So I think they are going to lean into that run game this year. So I don't think we'll see Stafford in that 2021 version of Stafford where he's just throwing the ball all over the field and just his arms on fire essentially. And so I think they're just going to be more of a I don't necessarily think they'll be more like a run heavy like maybe like a I don't know, like a Baltimore Ravens type offense where it's just very run heavy, but I do think they are going to involve the run game a little bit more than they have in the past.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair expectations. Now looking into that running game, Kyren Williams was kind of everybody fantasy players' favorite waiver wire ad last year. He is absolutely fantastic, seeing all the volume that he saw. But this year, they draft kind of a high pedigree running back, Blake Corum, out of the University of Michigan. Do you still see Kyren Williams kind of being the bell cow of this offense, similar to what Todd Gurley did for years? Or do you see Blake Corum kind of eating into his workload, and could this be moving more towards a running back by committee approach?
Yeah, I think when Sean McVay finds a running back that he likes, he finds a running back that he loves that running back. He leans into that running back, and Kyren Williams obviously had the foot injury in OTAs, and when he came back in training camp, Sean McVay said something along the lines of, "Man, did I miss you in the offseason?" Like he absolutely loves Kyren Williams. So, and then I think Sean McVay also understands just kind of what Kyren Williams did for this offense and what he unlocked for this offense last year. They averaged 27.2 points per game with him on the field. They had one of the most efficient running games when he was healthy, and it was just it was night and day with him off the field. I think they only averaged 14.3 points per game with him out, and they had one of the least efficient offenses. I think they ranked 27th in EPA with him on IR. So yeah, I think Sean McVay sees that, he understands that, and I think you look at 2019. You have Gurley coming off that knee injury. They draft Darrell Henderson, who they drafted in the third round, and I mean Darrell Henderson and Blake Corum are obviously two different running backs. I would definitely say Blake Corum was more successful in college, but that year Darrell Henderson only had 39 carries in 2019. And they still really leaned into Todd Gurley, and so I do think that Blake Corum is going to I think he'll have more than 39 carries than Darrell Henderson did back in 2019. But I still think this is I do think this is still Kyren Williams' backfield. I think the Blake Corum pick was more about being able to still have that same efficiency in the run game when Kyren Williams is out than it was about having more of this 50-50 split. I see it kind of more being maybe 65-35, maybe 70-30 at worst. But yeah, I don't think this is a full-on committee by any means. I could see maybe Blake Corum maybe stealing some touchdowns in the red zone and getting some more work there. But I still think I was just kind of looking at the numbers, and I mean, even if you take away some touchdown regression, take away 5 touchdowns, take away 200 yards from Kyren Williams, he's still right there with Breece Hall as the RB6 in fantasy points per game last season. So, and again, that's him missing 4 games with injury and sitting the final game due to rest. So, yeah, I think Sean McVay loves Kyren Williams, and I don't see this as a 50-50 committee by any means.
Awesome. That's definitely music to Kyren Williams owners' ears. That's for sure.
Yeah. So real quick, you mentioned the foot injury. Like, that's not a concern anymore?
No, not a concern anymore. No, he seems to be. I think it was more Reds being precautious with him during OTAs and making sure he was ready for camp. And there's been really no talk of it since camp started.
Good to know. Good to know. All right, so we are a fantasy focused show. So we've got to ask one question that's a little more fantasy relevant here. And we ask this to everybody who comes on. Who's the one player who's going to surprise people, good or bad, that fantasy football managers need to know about?
I would throw Colby Parkinson in that mix as somebody that can surprise people from a good perspective, I guess. I do think he was underutilized in Seattle from a pass catching perspective. Tyler Higbee's going to be out at least the first probably 4 games of the season with coming back from the ACL and the MCL, and who knows how much the Rams use him when he does come back and how effective he is. They paid Parkinson a lot of money in free agency. And again, I think this is a team that does want to get bigger in the red zone. I think Colby Parkinson is going to be used a lot in the red area, and the tight end position in fantasy is just it's so hit or miss. I mean, it can be very, very touchdown dependent. So having a guy that kind of is on the field in the red zone and maybe can get you a touchdown any given week. I think Colby Parkinson could be that guy.
Good to know. I just snagged him up in Raz Ball in a best ball league. So let's go. All right. So that's it for the Rams training camp review here. Blaine, I want to thank you for coming on. This was great information. But before we let you go, let everybody know where they could find you and what you got going on.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at @BGrisekTST. I'm always putting out some Rams content there, and then you can read all my stuff over at turfshowtimes.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks again, Blaine, and hopefully we get to do this again.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
I miss
Great
you.
Stuff.
All right. So that's it for this episode of our training camp reviews. Dylan, if you don't have anything else, I think we can just call it a show.
All right. That wraps it up. Thanks, Joe.
All right, man. See ya.